Judges chapter 14. Samson's marriage. Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. But his father and mother said to him, Is there not a woman among the daughters of your kinsmen or among all our people that you must go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me, for she pleases me well. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an occasion against the Philistines. At that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and he came to the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he tore the lions asunder as one tears a kid. And he had nothing in his hands. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. And after a while, when he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion, and honey. He scraped it out of his hands and went on, eating as he went. And he came to his father and mother, and gave some to them, and they ate. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the carcass of the lion. And his father went down to the woman, and Samson made a feast there, for so the young men used to do. And when the people saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said to them, Let me now put a riddle to you. If you can tell me what it is within the 7 days of the feast, and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 festal garments. But if you cannot tell me what it is, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 festal garments. And they said to him, Put your riddle, that we may hear it. And he said to them, One of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. And they could not in 3 days tell what the riddle was. On the 4th day they said to Samson's wife, Entice your husband to tell us what the riddle is, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us here to impoverish us? And Samson's wife wept before him and said, You only hate me. You do not love me. You have put a riddle to my countrymen, and you have not told me what it is. And he said to her, Behold, I have not told my father nor my mother, and shall I tell you? She wept before him the 7 days that their feast lasted, and on the 7th day he told her, because she pressed him hard. Then she told the riddle to her countrymen, and the men of the city said to him on the 7th day, before the sun went down, What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And he said to them, If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would have not found out my riddle. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon, and killed 30 men of the town, and took their spoil, and gave the festal garments to those who he had told the riddle. In hot anger he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. Judges chapter 15. Samson defeats the Philistines. After a while, at the time of wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife with a kid. And he said, I will go in to my wife in the chamber. But her father would not allow him to go in. And her father said, I really thought that you utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Pray, take her instead. And Samson said to them, This time I shall be blameless in regard to the Philistines, when I do them mischief. So Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and took torches, and he burned them tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of tails. And when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines, and burned up the shocks and the standing grain, as well as the olive orchards. Then the Philistines said, Who has done this? And they said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion. And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. And Samson said to them, If this is what you do, I swear I will be avenged upon you, and after that I will quit. And he smote them hip and thigh with great slaughter, and he went down and stayed in the cleft of the rock of Etham. Then the Philistines came up and encamped in Judah, and made a raid on Lehi. And the men of Judah said, Why have you come up against us? They said, We have come up to bind Samson, to do him as he did to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Etham, and said to Samson, Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us? And he said to them, As they did to me, so have I done to them. And they said to him, We have come down to bind you, that you may give you into the hands of the Philistines. And Samson said to them, Swear to me that you will not fall upon me yourselves. They said to him, No, we will only bind you and give you into their hands. We will not kill you. So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes which were on his arms became as flax, that he caught fire, and his bonds melted off his hands. And he bound a fresh jawbone of an ass, and put out his hand and seized it. And when he slew 1,000 men, and Samson said, With the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of an ass have I slain 1,000 men. When he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone out of his hand, and that place was called Ramah Lehi. And when he was very thirsty, he called on the Lord and said, Thou hast granted this great deliverance by the hands of thy servant, and shall I now die of thirst, and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? And Lord split open the hollow place that is at Lehi, and there came out water from it. And when he drank, his spirit returned, and he revived. Therefore the name of it was called En-Hakkore. It is at Lehi to this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. Judges chapter 16. Samson and Delilah. Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a harlot, and he went in to her. The Gazites were told, Samson has come here, and they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. They kept quiet all night, saying, Let us wait till the light of the morning, then we will kill him. But Samson lay till midnight, and at midnight he arose and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the 2 posts, and pulled them up, bar and all, and put them on his shoulder, and carried them to the top of the hill that is before Hebron. After this he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lord of the Philistine came to her and said to her, Entice him, and see wherein his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to subdue him, and we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. And Delilah said to Samson, Please tell me wherein your great strength lies, and how you might be bound, that one could subdue you. And Samson said to her, If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings which have not been dried, then I shall become weak, and be like other men. Then the lords of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now she had men lying in wait in the inner chamber, and she said to them, The Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he snapped the bowstrings as a string of toast snaps when it touches the fire. So the secret of his strength was not known. And Delilah said to Samson, Behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Please tell me how you might be bound. And he said to her, If they bind me with new ropes they have not used, then I shall become weak, to be like other men. So Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them, and said to him, The Philistines are upon you, Samson. And the men lying in wait were in an inner chamber. But he snapped the ropes of his arms like a thread. And Delilah said to Samson, Until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you might be bound. And he said to her, If you weave the 7 locks of my head with a web and make it tight with a pin, then I shall become weak and be like other men. So while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his head and wove them into a web, that she made them tight with a pin, and said to him, The Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he woke from his sleep and pulled away the pin and loom and the web. And she said to him, How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times, and you have not told me wherein your great strength lies. And when she pressed him hard with her words day after day, and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. And he told her all his mind, and said to her, A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If I be shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like other men. When Delilah saw that he had told her all his mind, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, Come up this once, for he has told me all his mind. Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands. She made him sleep upon her knees, and she called a man and made him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him, and she said, The Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he woke from his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times, and shake myself free. And he did not know that the Lord had left him. And the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes, and brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with bronze fetters, and he ground at the mill in the prison. But the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Samson's death. Now the Lord of the Philistines gathered to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon their god, and to rejoice, for they said, Our God has given Samson our enemy into our hand. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, Our God has given our enemy into our hand, the ravager of our country, who has slain many of us. And when their hearts were merry, they said, Call Samson, that he may make sport for us. So they called Samson out of the prison, and he made sport before them. They made him stand between the pillars. And Samson said to the Lord who held him by the hand, Let me feel the pillars on which the horse rests, that I may lean against them. Now the house was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there, and on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women who looked on while Samson made sport. Then Samson called the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me. I pray thee only this once, O God, that I may be avenged upon the Philistines for one of my 2 eyes. And Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars upon which the house rested, and he leaned his weight upon them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, Let me die with the Philistines. Then he bowed with all his might, and the house fell upon the Lord and upon all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he slew at his death were more than those whom he had slain during his life. Then his brothers and all his family came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Esauthol in the tomb of Manoah his father. He had judged Israel 20 years. Judges chapter 17. Micah and the Levite. There was a man of the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah, and he said to his mother, The 1,100 pieces of silver which were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, and also spoke it in my ears, behold, the silver is with me. I took it. And his mother said, Blessed be my son by the Lord. And he restored the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. And his mother said, I consecrate the silver to the Lord from my hand for my son, to make a graven image and a molten image. Now therefore I will restore it to you. So when he restored the money to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave it to the silversmith, who made it into a graven image and a molten image, and it was in the house of Micah. And the man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and tephirim, and installed one of his sons, who became his priests. In those days there were no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. Now there was a young man of Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. And the man departed from the town of Bethlehem in Judah to live where he could find a place, and he journeyed. He came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and Micah said to him, From where do you come? And he said to him, I am a Levite of Bethlehem in Judah, and I am going to sojourn where I find a place. And Micah said to him, Stay with me, and be to me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, and a suit of apparel, and your living. And the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. And Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and was in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, Now I know that the Lord will prosper me, because I have a Levite as priest.